So good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening to wherever you are, and welcome to the University of Cape Town's Chemicals Network discussion that we will be having today. I'm Professor Andrea Rother. I'm head of the Environmental Health Division at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, and you are all most welcome. So the Chemicals Network is being kindly funded by Sweden through the Swedish Chemicals Agency, ChemE. And really the purpose of this Chemicals Network discussion forum is to bring representatives together from different regions, different sectors, and different stakeholder groups in order to foster a mutually supporting consortium of stakeholders where we can discuss various issues related to chemicals. Particularly, we're hoping through this community of practice to build the capacity of regulators, researchers, and NGOs in low and middle income countries, as well as to discuss emerging issues in chemicals management. We hope to achieve this by learning from each other, sharing information and data, identifying gaps and problem solving collectively to reduce and prevent chemical poisonings and environmental contamination, and with a view really for a toxic-free future for the next generation. So this is not a webinar. If you're new to this, this is actually a discussion forum. So we will have two presenters today who will lead us into questions and polls that we will engage with in the chat. It is a non-partisan group. That is, we may not agree with everyone, but we respect each other's opinions. We will be, as I said, discussing in the chat. And so therefore, I ask when you do comment in the chat, if you could always indicate your country or your organization, which helps then all of us to place where you're coming from. So today's discussion is looking at risk communication, a tool to achieve sound management of chemicals. And as I indicated, we are privileged to have two presenters today who will be taking us through the questions. The first one is Cynthia Davis. Cynthia, you're most welcome, is currently studying for her PhD in climate change and sustainability. She has a master's degree in disaster, environmental, and strategic management. She obtained her first degree in general nursing and currently works for the WHO Africa Regional Office as a technical officer in environmental health promotion. She is managing projects and activities focused on the sound management of chemicals and is also working on air pollution and occupational health and safety. She previously worked at the National Public Health Institution of Liberia in the Division of Environmental and Occupational Health. An impressive CV. Cynthia, again, you're most welcome. Our second presenter will be Jenna Larkin, who is an environmental protection specialist with the United States Environmental Protection Agency. She has a dual master's degree in environmental science and public health affairs from the Indiana University School of Public and Environmental Affairs. She also has a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science from the University of Albany in New York. She's a member of the Environmentally Preferable Purchasing Program, which helps federal purchasers identify and procure sustainable products and services. She manages and is the communications lead for the EPA's recommendations of specification standards and eco-labels, which include over 40 private sector standards, eco-labels certification that may be used within federal procurement. She also participates in the development of product sustainable standards and is currently the lead of the professional services sector and provides technical support for the electronics and building materials sector. Again, another impressive CV. Jenna, thank you for joining us and you're most welcome. So I will hand over first to Cynthia, who will give us a background to question one. So Cynthia, over to you. You'll just need to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I was muted. So thank you so much, Professor, and thank you, everyone. Good afternoon from wherever you are. For us, it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so good afternoon, and we look forward to a fruitful discussion. So this presentation will capture the risk communication of the CHEMOS project. So we have the GEF funds, the GEF implementing partner, which is the sole provider for the donor funding. And then we also have the African Institute, which is the executing agency, and UNEP, which is the implementing agency for this project, and also WHO is the implementing agency for the French countries. Next, please. So in this content, we'll look at the background, the key objectives of the project, the function of the project steering committees, and the focus area of the project, along with the high intervention. Next slide, please. So for the background of this project, we look at the, sorry about that, I didn't see. Okay, it's like you are. Okay, for the project background, this is a project titled Integrated Health and Environmental Observatory, Legal and Institutional Strengthening for the Sound Management of Chemicals. So for short, we call it the African CHEMOS project. This is a combination project of donors funding along with the co-financing. So the GEF has provided $10.5 million for this project, and the co-financing from country is equivalent to $20 million. So the total worth of this project is about $30.5 million. This project is implemented in 9 countries. We have Ethiopia, Gabon, Kenya, Madagascar, Mali, Senegal, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. This project has 2 executing agencies. So the WHO African Regional Office is responsible for the 4 Francophone countries. So we have Madagascar, Gabon, Mali, Senegal. And African Institute is responsible for implementing activities for Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. This is a 5-year project which commenced in 2017. The expected date of this project was November 2022, excuse me for that. But due to the global pandemic, the project was extended at no cost, precisely the phase 2 component of the project, which is the high intervention, to June 2023. Next slide, please. So the project objectives. So this project focuses on to contribute to improve health and environment through strengthening national and regional institutional and implementing priority chemicals and waste-related interventions. So in order to achieve this objective, we look at strengthening capacity of relevant national government departments and also institutional to monitor pollution, prioritize area for intervention, as well as plan and implement solutions through active involvement of communities. And then we also look at major chemical waste and pollution problems requiring actions to be identified and prioritized. So we set up key project indicators to establish the measure improvements in sound management of chemical, and also look at the institutional, legal, and capacity building needs assessed, and also look at capacity development for each activity that has been identified. And then we move forward to see how best we can establish data collection, monitoring, and surveillance, and intersectoral coordination mechanism. So on the overall, this project proposes to develop a prototype of national integration, health and environmental observatory, including a code of data indicators, enabling data aggregation to provide timely and evidence-based information to predict. So we can look at also the prevention and to reduce chemical risks to human health and the environment. Next slide, please. So we look at the focus area. So in that focus area, we develop strategic framework and other program strategy that we are going to look at. to be able to address the outcome. The countries implementing this project have already developed communication tools in each implementing activities. So if you look at that, you will see that program 1 focus on the development and demonstration to demonstrate new tools and economic approaches for managing harmful chemical and waste in a sound manner. So this activity cost is $2 million. And then program 3 look at the reduction and the elimination of POPs, the persistent organic pollutant, which estimated at the cost of 2.5 million. And then program 6, look at it to support regional approaches to eliminate and reduce harmful chemical and waste throughout all of the life cycle. This target look at 6.5 million of the project. Next slide, please. So considering the function of the PSC, every year, all project implementing partners, consultants, executing agencies, and all other countries implementing the project meet to discuss project relevance. So the idea is to fast track the project implementation in order to be able to have a success story of the project. So in order to achieve this goal, the regional PSC steering committee meet annually every year to discuss the project output and the achievement. So in this level, we look at the review the project implementation in the project country, including successes, challenges, opportunities, and lessons learned from all of the project country and other findings to be followed up. And then we review updates from the project partners and executing agencies at all levels, both national and regional level, and develop some training capacity that some training that we can look at and be able to identify if needed. And then we'll also look at to approve the duty work plan, because every year, each country will develop work plan at the regional level, at the country level. So all of this work plan need to be validated, discussed, validated, and approved for the next fiscal year. And we also look at the procurement plan. Each country will develop a procurement plan, and then we'll review that, whether it will be in line with the national procurement standard or the WHO standard, things like that. So all of those things are considered during the PSC meeting. Next slide, please. This project comes in like, we have 2 phases of the project. We have the primary implementation and the high intervention. So all 9 countries are implementing their phase 1 of this project, which is focusing on policy development, communication intervention, awareness raising, and the establishment of the observatory and other key components of the project. So out of the 9 countries that are implementing the phase 1 of the project, only 6 countries were eligible for the high intervention for phase 2 component of the project. So we look, they are Gabon, Kenya, Madagascar, Mali, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. So these are the countries that are implementing the high intervention. So this high intervention is committed to protecting health in the environment from harmful substances. We look at the PCB, the PTB, the unintentional poisoning, we look at mercury emission, and all of those POPs that are within the environment. So the concentration is on the collections, the transport, and the storage of all of those chemicals that are within the environment. Next slide, please. So I think this is the last slide for the presentation. So we look at the establishment of the observatory. So institutionally, and we provide technical barrier. We look at technical barrier preventing adequate management of harmful chemical and waste through reduction in sound data collection to the establishment of the National Observatory. So the idea is that country will be able to provide expert knowledge for the management of activity even after the project ends. So all countries at this stage has already developed their plan for the establishment of the observatory. We have had several meetings with them, and the government is also waiting to support this process. So this is a very good initiative that we are all looking forward to see how best it can be achieved. Because most of the time that when we have a project in country and the project ends, many activities and for the CHEMOS project, we want to have a continuation, even though the donors will not be there to provide funding, but government should be able to show that responsibility to see how best they can implement activity for this project. So as experts, as the Center of Expertise, they will be able to provide critical, clinical, public health, and chemical safety services to manage harmful chemical of toxic exposure and poisoning within the environment at a cost-effective manner. Because we will not have donor funding at this time, and we all know the strength of the government. So we see how best government can take in funding and responsibility at their own will to provide this support for the continuation of implementation of the activity. So thank you very much. And then let's see what next there.
So thank you, Cynthia. I think it's really important, for all of us here on this call who are working on chemicals risk management. We often talk about evidence-based policy making. We talk about the need for collecting data, but then how to communicate that data to the policymakers. So the ChemObs project is really very ambitious about trying to collect information that will help inform how to prioritize what needs to be addressed in terms of the risks within the countries that are participating, and hopefully other countries in the future who will be using the observatory information. So thank you very much for outlining that for us. And we look forward to the impact from the ChemObs project. So Cynthia has taken us to question 1, which is asking what is the best way to communicate current chemical management health risks or emergencies within your country. So maybe within your country, or some of you may be representing an organization. So we'll spend about 20 minutes discussing this in the chat. And Cynthia, you're welcome to stay on and keep your mic open, and you can just speak to the questions and the comments that come in the chat. I don't expect you to type. Everyone else will be typing. If you have questions for Cynthia specifically about what she presented, please do feel free to put that in the chat as well. And there'll be a poll question shortly. So I'll see you all in the chat room. Cynthia, can you see the postings in the chat? You're muted.
Okay.
So you can go ahead and respond to anything you see in there. In the meantime, we ask people to click on the Menti link that's in the chat and respond to the poll that has just been posted. Thanks.
So just to address one of the comments from Professor, so the comment, one challenge for risk communication is how to communicate chemical risks to consumer, and particularly low literate consumer. Cynthia, how has the CHEMOS project addressed that? So thank you so much for that question. we have asked each country to develop their communication strategies. So they came up with, they have domesticated those strategies to their own domain to see how best it can suit them. So we look at the different vernacular they have in their countries. So all of those vernacular was accepted. They have already ongoing, they have already set up timeline for which each country can be able to succeed within the implementation time. So what happened, like, let's take this case as an example for Mali. Mali has this issue of the tar and dye. I don't know whether you know the Bazan, the best Bazan in Africa is coming from Mali. There's a specific chemical they use to do the tar and dye to that Bazan. So we initiated the process, and then we invited all of those large consumers to come to participate into this training. So they came, and then we have 50% women of that event. And then we demonstrated how the risk is communicated through tar and dye. So we had a first-hand information, we print out flyers, we gave out t-shirts, we gave out lapels, because if you do paint and notepad, those people don't need those things. They need something that they can wear that others will see and be able to identify, yeah, this is the issue that we are having in Africa, or this is the issue we are having with specific chemical. So with that, it was successful. And then right now, according to latest information from Mali, women they have already been sensitizing their colleagues on how to do the tar and dye to reduce the rates of infection. So this is something that we have been successful with. And the case of other countries as well, like Tanzania, Gabon, Madagascar, in all of those countries, they are working in line with the risk communication practice that have already been developed to see how best they can succeed. And then going forward, we have decided that individually, they should have their own capacity, where in the home, the mother should be able to tutor her children on the effect of chemicals. For example, do not leave chlorine exposed in the house. It's dangerous. And it should stay a certain amount of time there. So those are some of those first-hand tips we are giving out to countries to see how best we can reduce the risks of infection within countries. So that is with the first questions. Let me go back and see the next one. Professor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm responding in the chat. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So for the next question, I'm saying, what is the most popular and effective media used in your awareness raising campaign? So we have printed billboards to a strategic location, for example, to those bus stop parking stations where you will have more population. We install those billboards there, and then we also have jingles. Jingles that will be played on the television, and then we look at hospitals, because most people also, especially for pregnant women, who have that in the OPD, where they will go and then they see the effect of chemical on the stream, they will be sensitized on how to approach when it comes to how to respond when it comes to chemical. And then we'll also look at Facebook. Right now, even if you don't have anything, you must have Facebook account that you can get on Facebook to see how best what is happening there. So we have a Facebook page that we can use, and then we also have a website that people can visit and see how best they can implement. Because at first we used to use a poster But the poster is not durable, it's not long-lasting, it's not sustainable. Today you will have it and tomorrow you will not. But for all of those things that we are talking about, those are things that are sustainable. We have that, we pay towards that, and they are functioning very well. So this is how this is the medium that we use to be able to communicate with our counterpart. Yes, exactly. Yes, we are also, let me see, Martin, we also look at policy development, which is good, but we are looking at reaching a targeted population. Policy development is really good, but how many persons will take policy document to read? And we want the late man out there to have access to this information. He does not have an office to go to the office where he can read those policies. So we make it available to him through flyers, through billboards, through other information, through radio talk shows. So those are some of the ways that we are using to be able to communicate our communication to people.
Cynthia, do you want to say anything about the results of the poll that's on the screen before we move on to the next one? Are you able to see the results?
Yes, I'm reading them one by one of those comments that are coming in.
And the poll, can you see the poll on the screen, where the ranking was done?
No, I cannot see that. Okay, yes, I'm seeing it now.
Okay, perhaps you just want to make a few brief comments about it, and then we'll move on to the next poll. Thanks.
Yes, so political will is a very good way to be able to achieve your objectives. But we also should consider politicians. Those are people, we all know politicians. Those are people who make statements. Politicians, those are people that will make political, we call them political statement and achiever. So they will come and make the political statement. So what we are also looking at is our own individual performance on how can we achieve these things. Because if I be able to achieve this today and you be able to achieve this today, we are moving. Even though the political willpower is supporting, because if you have your project or if you want to achieve anything, and if you don't have the political will, you are going nowhere. Because those are the people that make decisions for us. So it's very good to consider that. But in addition to that, we should also consider our individual performance, our group coordinations. So coordinations among ourselves is very important. So the second thing is the legal framework, which is extremely good. But developing legal framework and putting it into practice, those are two different things. Because there are a lot of policies that have been developed. It's at the table. It has not been practicalized into taking effect. So legal framework, when we are developing it, we should also consider the implementation of those frameworks. We should not just develop it and say, yeah, the dissemination time will come, but in some cases we'll develop the framework and then we'll look for additional time for dissemination, which kills the spirit. So it's always important that the two goes along, the two of them goes together. So we should look at to see how best we can implement one at a time. We should implement the legal framework at the same time we implement the, we implement the communication aspect of that framework we are looking at. And then the next thing is the funding and human resources, which is very good. Without funding, it's impossible to achieve your objective because you need money. Even the politicians will need money to be able to push your case forward. So we need money, we need a capacity, we need human resources, people that will be there to implement this activity. So from an honest review of this full chart, I think it's a fair decision that they have made. And then we look at the broad communication of the risks of chemicals. People should be aware of the risks chemical poses to their health. Because to be honest with you, people know chemical is dangerous, but they don't know the level at which chemicals are dangerous. They don't know. So we have to see how best we can create awareness, to enforce awareness raising, to make people to know the danger of chemicals, which is very, 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 very important. This is something that we should not overlook, because without awareness raising, without the knowledge of people having to manage chemical in a sound manner, will create another disasters for us, which is not good. So the awareness raising is a key component that we need to look at and address. And then we look at expose and showcasing the value of the work. This is excellent. This is excellent. So we look at the exposures and showcasing how people should be able to look at the value of their own work they are doing. This is very good. So on the overall, the pool is very comprehensive. And then looking at that, we can see how best we can address chemical and be able to add up to the existing capacity and knowledge that we already have. So considering all of those things, we can see how best to look at that. So over to you.
Thanks,
Professor.
Cynthia, for those responses. We're now going to have the final poll. We have about 12 minutes left in this discussion, for discussion of question 1. So in which ways do participants think that the ChemOps project could make a positive impact in their country, even if they weren't a participating country? Or how do they think it could be improved? I mean, you might have just been introduced to the ChemOps project, but that's all right. You can perhaps have some ideas. When you click on the link in the chat and go to Mentimeter and give your response, please do include your country or organization. Thank you.
The pool is still ongoing? Professor?
Sorry, I was busy trying to look at the chat. Yes, it is ongoing. Only one person has posted, so we're still waiting for people to post some response. You can click on the link in the chat and then give your response. I don't know if you can see, Cynthia, what's being posted, but there is some discussion in the chat.
Yes, I'm looking at that. Let me see. Which one I can respond to? I think yes, there are so many. I don't know which one to start with. Since one challenge for risk communication. Yes, someone mentioned the issue of the media. Media is a very good way to fast track any communication that you want to send out to people. Yes, we look at communication and coordination, which is good. That is the most popular and effective media used in witness reason. So like I said, we use Facebook, we use billboards, we use posters, we use jingles, radio talk shows to avoid the spread of wrong information and risks. I think I will be talking in risks. Communication from the Department of Health must issue a necessary information section. Exactly. This is so true. So every department within the Ministry of Environment or whatever ministry you work with, they have a communication department. So most of the time they issue newsletter, and those information should also capture risk communication, specifically as it relates to chemical when it comes to the environment. That is one of the communication practice of discussion we are having with the most recent communication. It seems to be the most pressing issue for many countries. The problem is how do we have an effective programs that work and are cost effective as well as increasing the students in the discussion. It's not only one way to information. Yes, someone mentioned a very key point, talks about the university. This is very good because you have so many students that should go out with that, the knowledge that chemical is dangerous. So once they have that idea, and it should be part of the curriculum. So chemical management should be something that should be part of the curriculum that people should consider and see how best they can address that in the future to come. Like now we are saying that for kindergarten, they should have a curriculum within their course, which has to do with the environment. So the issue of chemicals will be communicated through that means as well. So we are looking forward to universities, high schools, and other learning sectors to see how best they can have the issue of the sound management of chemicals being taught to all of their students. Mm-hmm.
Cynthia, perhaps you want to respond to some of the comments that have been posted on the poll. You'll see that there's been responses from Kenya and Malawi and Tanzania and South Africa and Kenya.
Okay, so the first question in the pool, we look at South Africa. He's saying that I'm not sure relevant decision makers in SA are aware of the result of the CHEMOS project. Perhaps this should be presented to the regional body like the AU SAPR, something like that. So for this issue, I don't want to say much on that, but I don't want to believe it because excuse me, is going up and down, it's not stable. That's how it's like. So the issue of the CHEMOS project, the African Institute is the one executing this project for 5 countries. So we have Tanzania, Ethiopia, Kenya, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. So all of these countries are being implemented by the SA, the African Institute. And then we also have the UCT, the University of Cape Town. They are also the one developing training material for this course, and then looking at other courses that can be relevant for this project. So I think that this is an issue that we can all look at, because the University of Cape Town is the one that offering master degree to candidates that is participating into this project. 1 minute, please.
Cynthia, we're going to need to wrap up on this question so that we can move on to the next one. I don't know if you want to give any final comments.
The thing is, the pool is not stable. It's like it just fluctuating. It's up and down. It's not.
It's rolling. It's called
yes.
a rolling, but we don't expect you to read them all out. We just expect you to make 1 or 2 general statements about if
creating awareness in Kenya. Let me look at that. So Kenya has already developed their communication strategy that they are using. So the awareness strategy that they're looking at is to target 80% of the population. So all of this population has already been invited for several meetings, coordinations among stakeholders, all of relevant government institutions, other partners within Kenya. So Kenya awareness raising strategy is a very good one that others can learn from. So they are doing well with their communication strategy. So when you look at the way it was designed to incorporate all of those ministries, agencies, implementing partners, and other international organizations. So Kenya has a very good communication strategy that we can look at and be able to share with other countries. So let me look at another one quickly. We'll talk about South Africa engagement and training communities on how to access and report information. That is very good. We look at the dissemination of information. We look at key findings from relevant data collection centers, and then seeing how best we can incorporate that and be able to establish one pool that we can use. And then let me look at another one quickly. I'm not sure Ethiopia has welcomed data collection of the herbal chemical in countries. So Ethiopia is now looking at the shipment of PCBs and other chemicals from. We have already initiated a process to see how best this information can be communicated to all relevant stakeholders. Communication strategy has already been developed. So all of those countries that we are referring to, they all have a vigorous communication strategy that we can use, and then see how best we can be able to develop all of information from that sector and implement. So all of our countries has already have their own communication strategy that is ongoing. So another one is here. Let me see which one I can look at.
It's fine, Cynthia. I think we need to move on. We're going to run out of time. So we'll need to move on to the next question, which is with Jenna. But just to say thank you very much for bringing the ChemObs project to the attention of participants. And perhaps one of the questions we should have asked is whether everyone had actually heard of the ChemObs project. It would be interesting, people can indicate in the chat if they'd actually heard of it or not. Perhaps you could post a link in the chat or give it to Eunice for people to get more information about the ChemObs project and how they can learn from what the other countries have done. I think that would be most useful. People can continue asking questions, but in the meantime, we're going to move on to Jenna Larkin from the US Environmental Protection Agency, who's been patiently waiting for her turn now to take us through risk communication. Cynthia, thanks again, and Jenna, over to you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Cynthia, for that great presentation. I even learned a lot from that. Thank you all for having me today. I'm happy to be able to present to you all. I'm going to talk to you all today about EPA's Environmentally Preferable Purchasing Program. So that is within the United States Environmental Protection Agency, within our Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics. So I sit within that pollution prevention side of the office. We help to implement the Pollution Prevention Act in the United States, meaning any different programs that can help stop the pollution from ever being created. So we like to implement programs and projects to reduce the pollution at the source. And one of the ways we do that is through environmentally preferable purchasing. So specifically today, I'm going to talk about how we utilize environmental performance standards and eco-labels to achieve a sustainable chemicals management strategy. Go ahead to the next slide. So here's just the scope of the Environmentally Preferable Purchasing Program. So we take a life cycle multi-attribute approach to defining what is environmentally preferable. We not only engage in developing and updating private sector product and service sustainability standards, but we also then assess them, and then we would recommend them to be used within federal purchasing, which is the topic I'm going to get into more today. We also assist the federal government and others in buying environmentally preferable products and services. We assist businesses, including small businesses, in selling their greener products to the federal government. And we also help to measure the benefits of buying greener products and services. Next slide. So I wasn't sure the background that you all had today, so I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. You might be familiar with the term eco-label, but environmental performance standard is a little less familiar. So environmental performance standard means that these are standards. They're often established by multi-stakeholder developed groups, which are groups that I sit on to represent the federal government and make sure that strong environmental and human health criteria are being incorporated into these standards. But there will also be representatives from nonprofit sectors, academia, the private sector, all sitting at the table at the same time, coming to consensus about what are the criteria that should be in these standards to determine if something is indeed environmentally preferable. And then often attached to these standards are eco-labels. So I'm sure you have seen eco-labels in grocery stores or just shopping at the mall or on some sort of online marketplace. So they're the marks placed on the product packaging or used within the marketplaces that can help consumers and other purchasers quickly and easily identify products that meet those specific environmental performance criteria. So it's an easy way for you to know, like, yes, this is a more sustainable product and service without knowing all those nitty-gritty details that went into the background of making that product. And eco-labels can be owned and managed by several different organizations, by the government, by nonprofit organizations, by the private sector. And that's actually what I'll be talking to you about today, is those eco-labels owned by the private sector and how the federal government uses those in our own procurements. So standards and eco-labels can be both single attribute and multi-attribute. So single attribute means that it focuses on a single life cycle stage, let's say the use phase, or a single environmental issue, let's say just the chemical ingredients of the product. As I said before, we really like to try and focus on multi-attribute standards and eco-labels, because this means that they are focusing on the entire life cycle of the product and services or service, and they're focusing on all the environmental issues that could happen throughout the life cycle of the product. So we like to make sure that we're hitting all the important things, not just one environmental issue at a time. Go ahead, next slide. So this is the tool I'm going to be talking about today, which is called our Recommendations of Specification Standards and Eco-Labels. So we really see this as leveling the playing field and bringing clarity to this very complex marketplace. So right now in the global marketplace, there's 460 plus eco-labels out there today. It's very hard for a general consumer, even institutional purchasers, to know which eco-labels are appropriate for them to use, in which product categories, which environmental issues are they covering. It gets very confusing very quickly. So that's where EPA's Environmentally Preferable Purchasing Program comes in. We take that global marketplace of eco-labels and we run it through our assessment process. Right now, there's two ways that eco-labels can get added to our recommendations. Based on a review and use by another federal agency, if they're already using it and it's working well for them, we'll adopt it into our recommendations. Or based on an assessment against our multi-stakeholder developed framework for environmental performance standards and eco-labels. I'll get into the framework a bit more in a different slide. But when we run it through either of those two options, then we come out with a much more streamlined set of recommendations for purchasers to look at. Right now, we recommend around over 40 private sector standards and eco-labels across 30 different product categories, and we have 3 specifications. So as you can see, that's a little snippet of our carpet product category. So if you're a purchaser and you're interested in buying carpet, you have no idea where to start, you can just click on our carpet product category and we'll say, okay, here's the first choice eco-labels that you should use. Here's our second choice. Here's some single attribute standards and eco-labels if you really want to focus on the VOC emissions of the carpet. So each category is a little bit different, but we try to make it as simple as possible for purchasers to find those more sustainable products by product category. Next slide. So just wanted to get into a little more detail of what types of environmental issues we're able to address by utilizing and participating in the development of these sustainability standards and eco-labels. So we really see these as supporting multiple administration priorities, but these are also priorities of many others. We can help to address climate change impact reduction, chemical safety, which is probably of most interest to this group today, circular economy, and environmental justice issues. Again, this comes from promoting and utilizing those multi-attribute sustainability standards and eco-labels. For example, within these eco-labels that we recommend and we help to develop, we're able to address several different chemical safety issues like full material inventory and disclosures, chemical alternatives assessments, selection of safer alternatives, and elimination or reduction of specific chemicals of concern. This can include chemicals residing in the product, used during the manufacturing stage. We really try to ensure that we are hitting the most important life cycle stage or hitting the most important chemical that is used either in the product or in the manufacturing of the product. Go ahead to the next slide. And this slide is just to show you a little more detail about what is our framework for assessing environmental performance and environmental performance standards and eco-labels. So we have 4 different sections of our framework, which all eco-labels will be assessed against. So we not only assess how the standard was developed, we want to make sure the right people were sitting at the table and it wasn't just a eco-label developed by industry and no one else was sitting at the table figuring out what is more environmentally preferable. Section 2, probably the most important to us, does the standard or eco-label, is it effective in addressing human health and the environmental issues for that specific product? Section 3 is all about conformity assessment. So we want to make sure that there's a third party checking to make sure that they're saying what they're supposed to be doing. This helps us reduce greenwashing in the marketplace. And then section 4, we assess their eco-label program management. So we really don't expect you all to be experts in how we assess standards and eco-labels, but we want you to see that we do a very thorough job of assessing standards and eco-labels in the marketplace, making sure that they're covering all the right issues. Go ahead, next slide. And I just wanted to zoom in a little closer into our section 2 of our framework, which is where we assess, is the standard or eco-label environmentally effective? So not only do we have criteria to address the transparency of the standards weighting methodologies, we also make sure that they're addressing all significant hotspots throughout all life cycle stages. So if chemicals in a product is one of the biggest concerns for that product category, this is a required criterion that the standard or eco-label must meet. So we would require them to reduce the toxicological hazards in that product or service. And we also would require them to disclose any chemicals of concern, which are included in that product or service. And we also have several leadership criteria within our section 2, which we encourage standards and eco-labels to reach for. And if they do already meet those criteria, we share them on our website and make sure everyone can hear their story and see what a leader they are in the marketplace. Go ahead to the next slide. And I wanted to show you all what we've been doing lately around PFAS. So we have several new initiatives within the US federal government on helping federal purchasers identify and procure products that do not contain PFAS. If you're not familiar with PFAS, these are also known as forever chemicals. They are very ubiquitous in the environment, in our water, in our air, everywhere. And so we have several initiatives within the US federal government to help reduce the amount of PFAS. So our specific lens at this is to help reduce PFAS in products and then help to have the federal government not buy those products. So the first step we've done to help purchasers identify products that don't contain PFAS is we looked through those 40+ standards and eco-labels that we're currently recommending. And we pulled out all the criteria we could find related to either the reduction or the elimination of PFAS in their products. And we published this new webpage in February of 2022. So you can see exactly how those our recommended standards and eco-labels are addressing PFAS. We'll have the name of the standard, we'll have the product categories where we cover them, the actual summary of the criterion language so you can see exactly how they're addressing them, and then if it's required or optional. You'll see that the standards are addressing this in a variety of different ways. There is no uniform way that they are addressing PFAS in their products at this time. But by doing this research, we really were able to find out what the marketplace is doing right now. And then we gathered the organization together in a webinar and just discussed with them, like, what are some of the barriers stopping you from incorporating criteria to address PFAS in your standards. We had some of the standards that were great leaders in this space present to the other organizations. So we were just sending the signal to these standard and eco-label organizations that addressing PFAS in their standards is a really important issue to the federal government, and encouraging them to either update or add new criteria to address PFAS in their products. Go ahead to next slide. I think that's it for me. That was a very quick overview of EPA's Environmentally Preferable Purchasing Program and standards and eco-labels. So happy to start addressing some questions.
Thanks, Jenna. I think that was a really important discussion. We talk more broadly about risk communication and what are the different mechanisms that can be used. And this eco-labeling concept, I think, is new for some people and for many countries, and how it could possibly work to reduce risks and inform the general public more. So I think it was very good the way that you highlighted some of the key issues. I do encourage people, if you have any questions specifically for Jenna about the presentation that she gave, please do post those in the chat. Otherwise, we will move on to question 2, which we will discuss in the chat. What are the possibilities of using environmental performance standards and eco-labels as a risk management strategy in your country, or perhaps your organization? And what would be the challenges that would be faced if you were to implement these? So please do continue the discussion in the chat now on question 2. And Jenna, you're welcome to respond like Cynthia did. You can leave your mic on. It's much easier. So thanks. I'll see everyone in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea, for saying one challenge is the standardization and government approval of eco-labeling. It is a difficult topic because each country goes at eco-labels in different ways. So in the US, the private sector are the ones to develop and manage most eco-labels, although we do have some managed by the government. But for example, the EU just has one eco-labeling program called the EU Flower, and that is owned and managed only by the government, and there are no private sector standards and eco-labels. So there's varying approaches to how to handle eco-labels throughout countries. So if anyone has any other stories about how their country or knows how their country addresses or uses eco-labels and standards, I'd be very interested to learn as well. Yeah, which do you think is more effective, government managed or industry managed? I have spent a lot of time thinking about that question, and I do not have the answer because I see negatives and positives from both approaches. I think having a government-owned eco-label is much more streamlined. You know exactly how the product category is going to be addressed. It's managed in the same way every single time, and that's not what you see when eco-labels and standards are developed by the private sector, because everyone is taking their own approaches to developing these things, and it's hard to have a uniform approach across product categories. Yeah, the challenge would be to put the standard in the form that it becomes mandatory. We definitely feel that in the US government as well. We have a latest executive order from the president that says federal purchasers must use our recommended standards and eco-labels to the maximum extent practicable, but that is as close to mandatory as we've gotten. And it does have a lot to do with all the other purchasing requirements that our federal purchasers must meet in order to buy one single product or service. So sustainability, unfortunately, is just one out of many purchasing requirements that we need to meet. Yeah, thanks, Martin. Relevant expertise and infrastructure is important to support the use of eco-labels. 100%. We even have difficulties in the US federal government finding those experts that can participate in the development of these standards and eco-labels to make sure their one singular issue is addressed appropriately in the standard. But there's definitely a lack of expertise and time from these people to participate in developing these standards. Yep. Blessing points out that one of the challenges is users understanding what the eco-labels really mean. And we definitely face that on a daily basis. What we're trying to send the signal is let the US federal government be the leader. Let us do all the background research to find out what are the environmental issues that should be addressed in each product or service category. Let us do the assessments to make sure they meet all of our criteria. And then our recommendations of standards and eco-labels is meant to be like the really easy tool that purchasers go to find the eco-labels by product categories. So we don't want them to become the experts in standards and eco-labels. You can leave it to us and just trust that we have a robust process, and just go to the product category you're interested in and find those eco-labels that would be appropriate to use. Yeah, another challenge Blessing points out is ensure the labels stand for what they are really portraying. And that's really what our program tries to help manage, reducing greenwashing in the marketplace. There's also something in the US called the Green Guide, which is meant to do just that, make sure that the environmental claims that companies and organizations are making are true and not greenwashing in the marketplace. So any organization that wants to make an environmental claim for their product must meet the Trade Commission's Green Guides, is what they're called.
Jenna, I don't know if you've responded already to the poll. If you would like to make any comments about the results that you see and how this, is this reflective of what you think in terms of in many countries, people's awareness of eco-labels?
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to see the somewhat familiar is the most voted for option there. I definitely don't expect everyone to be an expert in standards and eco-labels. Again, it's a really complex field to be familiar in, and that's what my job is, to try and make it easy for others to understand. So I'm glad to see people are somewhat familiar with eco-labels, hoping that you're familiar with them because you're browsing for them in the store to help buy a more sustainable product or service, or browsing for those eco-labels online to help you with identifying more sustainable products and services. And then for the people who voted not familiar at all, really hope that I help to teach you something about standards and eco-labels today, and you can start to either use them in your own purchasing at home or in your organization, help to create a more sustainable purchasing program. Yeah, so Jane points out in the chat, a challenge could be common understanding and standard for all stakeholders. And that is really the most difficult part in standards development, because you have every single kind of stakeholder sitting at the table fighting for the issues that they think are important. And you have to come to consensus about the criteria and the standards. So that really is the most difficult thing to do, is having a common understanding and common interest in what you think the standard should achieve. And I should say that you all participating on the call today can participate in standards development activities. They're always looking for stakeholders to participate, from government entities, from nonprofits, from academia. Even the general public can participate in standards development. Each standards development organizations has their own rules on how to participate, but they all are required to have a balanced group of stakeholders in these groups, and are always looking for people to participate, many of them looking for international participants as well. Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Your second comment there, you must have strong institutional, legal, and regulatory environments to ensure level playing fields and reduce cheating. Definitely, I 100% agree with that. Even though we have a robust environmentally preferable purchasing program and robust set of laws to try and regulate environmental claims in the marketplace, we still see greenwashing happening. And it's unfortunate we don't have enough enforcement and regulating of those claims. Okay, I see someone saying in Zambia, they do use standards, but the unfortunate thing is saying that the standards are not mandatory. Eco-labels are used by some companies, but on a voluntary basis. Yep. So really getting at that issue of it needs to come from the top. It needs to become a mandatory requirement to use standards and eco-labels in purchasing. I definitely agree. Okay, some of the products with eco-labels from the US are already used because of the close diaspora trade with the two countries. Oh, very cool. I'd be curious what eco-labels you've seen in your country. Oh, I see Andrea's question. How would people find out more information about participating in standards development? That's a good question. We have information for federal purchasers specifically, but not for like how the other organizations or general public can participate. So I can work on that after this call to put together some resources for people that you can send around. And I see the next poll question has launched. Does your organization use standards or eco-labels to guide purchasing decisions? 3 votes for yes. That's really good to hear. 1 for no and 2 don't know. I think that's definitely as expected. Not everyone knows what's happening in their procurement decisions. If any of you know specific names of eco-labels or standards that your country uses, I would love to hear what those are in the chat. But I know that's very specific information that not everyone knows. Thanks for putting those links in the chat to my program's web pages where you can learn more information. The link, if you click on the link to the recommendations of standards and eco-labels, you can see all the product categories that we cover, every single standard or eco-label that we have reviewed and approved as appropriate to use in federal purchasing. And as we like to say, if it's appropriate for use in the US federal government purchasing, it's likely appropriate for use in your organization as well. So we encourage that people just adopt what we're recommending. And as you can see, I went through the whole process of what we assess standards and eco-labels against. So hope you would trust that our process is robust enough for your organization as well. We don't want others to have to repeat the process that we go through to assess standards and eco-labels. So I see in Zambia, we're not yet using eco-labeling, but we are using GHS standards to guide consumers. I actually don't know what GHS standards stands for, if you could clarify. Yes, awesome. Great to hear that you're implementing Sustainable Development Goal 12. I believe that's where the sustainable purchasing part of things falls. And you're using eco-labels to do that. Yes, there is basically an eco-label out there for every environmental issue that you want to address. And what our program tries to encourage is that let's reduce the amount of single attribute eco-labels out there. Like there could be one for post-consumer recycled content. There could be one for plastics. There could be one for chemicals. We encourage this multi-attribute approach to let's join all those single attributes together into one standard or one eco-label so we can address all the environmental hotspots at the same time. A globally harmonized system for classifying and labeling chemicals. Yes, thank you. I am familiar with that standard as well. Thanks, Patrick, for that comment. They say we'd need strong cost benefit value propositions for local manufacturers to adopt these standards of eco-labels so that they know that they will remain competitive. Very good point. Not something my program has information or data on right now. But yeah, really important topic to get these more sustainable products and services to other countries. And national standards bodies can ensure imported goods meet agreed eco standards. Yep. More and more national standards bodies are trying to collaborate across countries to create standards and eco-labels that are uniform across countries and can be applied seamlessly across countries, but that is definitely an area that needs improvement. Ooh, list of South African eco-labels. Thanks so much. I will look into that. 50, yes. See, probably already getting confusing to people. Which ones address which product categories? Which environmental issues are they addressing? Do they have a third party coming in to check to make sure they're doing what they're doing? So that's what my program helps to clarify for purchasers. Oh, great. Thanks for that study. Consumers' perceptions of eco-labeling. That should be a good one. Oh, and specifically for South Africa. Cool. Yep, love the idea of pitching this to your environmental agency to use within your existing or regulations that are currently being developed. It's a great way to address several environmental issues at the same time, but there are other things that you need to make sure they can meet, which is product availability, supplier availability. But I hope today I was able to share some insights from the U.S. federal government on how we use standards and eco-labels, and it just can help to spur some ideas in your minds of how you can start to use them in your organization's procurements as well as your own purchasing at home, in the grocery store. You'll find eco-labels everywhere.
I think you raised some good points about, how does one actually assess a good eco-label? And I think that's probably the next challenge, is,
Yeah.
and I think that's a key point with risk communication is it's one thing to say, we need awareness raising, we need to have risk communication materials, but it's another thing is who's actually vetting them, who's checking them. Is the information actually accurate? Or is it more promoting a particular vested interest?
Yep.
So I think those are very important points. Do you want to comment at all about the poll?
Does your organization use standards and eco-labels to guide purchasing decisions? Okay, mostly yes, so that's good news. And hopefully for all the no's and don't knows, you now have more information to take back to your organization today to try and encourage adoption of standards and eco-labels in your purchasing. And maybe the easiest way to do it is to start with one purchase category that you spend a lot of money in. There's more sustainable products out there. There's an eco-label. You can go to our list and see if there's one that meets your needs. And just try to get that incorporated into the purchasing of that specific product.
Yeah, this question made me think about the University of Cape Town, which we have a big environmental sustainability policy and process. And I'm going to ask them about the eco-labeling. I'm not quite sure how we do it for procurement. So
yeah,
even
great
universities.
Great way to also address your supply chain as well, which is a big focus area for many organizations and universities these days. Great. Someone mentioned that they have a low carbon development strategy that eco-labels fits perfect into. Absolutely. Several of these standards and eco-labels include criteria to reduce the carbon emissions in the manufacturing and in the product itself. So definitely a great strategy to reduce carbon as well.
We'll conclude in the next few minutes. So I'll just give an opportunity if anyone has any last burning comment or question. And Jenna, if you want to make any last comments or summary statement, it's been a very important discussion. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me. I really appreciate all these comments coming into the chat. I have a lot to learn about what other countries are doing to use standards and eco-labels as well. But please reach out to me separately if you have any questions about how the U.S. federal government is using them and what types of issues they can help you address. I would be happy to answer them.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And we'll make sure that your email is provided in our summary. So there'll be a digest that comes out from this discussion that will summarize the 2 questions that we had and the polls and people's comments and discussion, as well as the links and the resources. And there'll be an opportunity to put more resources in if needed. Please make sure that you have signed up for the Chemical Network. If you would like to find out about future discussions, you can see our next one is on the 6th of December, where we'll be speaking about chemical risk management issues. And if you would like to get the digest as well, please make sure you've signed up. We also do a newsletter that comes out. We link it to the discussion, so you can see in the chat, there was an October issue on risk communication. And it also, again, provides lots of resources, information on the topic at hand. So please do sign up by clicking on the link. I'd like to thank both our presenters very much. So Cynthia and Jenna, who took up their time today to give us a lot of information from what their organizations are doing in terms of risk communication and how important it is, particularly in chemicals risk management. So thank you to the presenters. Thank you to Eunice from the University of Cape Town, who was in the background, making sure that the slides were changing and the polls were working. Thank you to all the participants who gave up their time to engage with these discussions. And I hope you will not only just leave the discussion, but that you will have taken something with you that you can implement in your work or share with your colleagues, or maybe you'll reach out with and discuss further with Jenna and Cynthia. So we will have an evaluation that will pop up shortly, and I ask you all to take a moment to respond to that. And otherwise, I wish you the best for the rest of your day, and stay safe. Thanks, everyone. And